A wife came home from a shopping trip only to find her husband in bed with a beautiful young woman. Shocked and furious, she screamed, "You unfaithful pig! How dare you do this to me? I am your devoted wife!" She was about to storm out when her husband frantically said, "Wait! Let me at least explain." "Fine," she snapped, "but these better be your last words to me." Her husband took a deep breath and began. "Well, while driving home, I saw this poor girl on the side of the road, tired, hungry, and wearing ragged clothes. I felt sorry for her, so I brought her home. She was starving, so I made her a meal from the roast beef you wouldn't eat because it was too fattening. Her sandals were falling apart, so I gave her a perfectly good pair of shoes you threw out because they were out of style. She was cold, so I gave her the brand new sweater I got you for your birthday, but you never wore because the color didn't suit you. Her jeans were torn, so I gave her a pair of yours that you used to love, until your sister bought the same pair. Then, as she was about to leave, she turned to me and said, 'Is there anything else your wife doesn't use anymore?'" An 85-year-old couple, married for nearly 60 years, died in a car accident. Thanks to the wife's obsession with healthy eating and exercise, they had been in excellent shape for the last 10 years. When they arrived at the pearly gates, St. Peter greeted them warmly and led them to their new heavenly mansion, a stunning home with a gourmet kitchen, a spa-like master bathroom, and a luxurious jacuzzi. The couple oohed and awed until the husband hesitantly asked, "This place is incredible, sir, but how much does it cost?" St. Peter chuckled. "Sir, this is heaven. It's free." Next, he took them out back, where a championship golf course stretched as far as the eye could see. "You can play here every day," Peter explained, "and each week the course changes to a replica of one of Earth's greatest golf courses." The husband's eyes widened. "Wow, and the green fees?" Peter sighed. "Sir, this is heaven. You play for free." Then they visited the clubhouse, where a lavish buffet was spread out, featuring the finest cuisines from around the world. "How much to eat?" the husband asked. "For the last time," Peter replied, "this is heaven. Everything is free." The husband, still skeptical, asked nervously, "So, where's the low-fat, low-cholesterol section?" Peter laughed. "That's the best part. You can eat whatever you want, as much as you want, and you'll never gain weight or get sick." Suddenly, the old man exploded in rage, threw down his hat, stomped on it, and started shouting. His wife and Peter tried to calm him down. "What's wrong?" his wife asked. The old man glared at her and yelled, "This is all your fault. If it weren't for your damn bran muffins, I could have been here 10 years ago." The FBI had an open position for an elite assassin. After an extensive screening process, background checks, interviews, and skills tests, they narrowed it down to 3 candidates. For the final test, an agent led the first man to a large metal door and handed him a gun. "Inside this room, you'll find your wife sitting in a chair. Your task is simple. Eliminate her. We need to know you'll follow orders, no matter what." The man stared at the gun in shock. "You can't be serious. I could never shoot my wife." The agent sighed. "Then you're not right for the job. Take your wife and go home." The second man was given the same instructions. He took the gun, entered the room, and silence followed for about 5 minutes. Finally, he came out, tears in his eyes. I tried, but I just couldn't do it." The agent shook his head. "You don't have what it takes. Take your wife home." Finally, the last candidate, a woman, was given the same instructions. She grabbed the gun, entered the room, and bang, bang, screaming, crashing, banging against the walls. Then silence. After a moment, the door creaked open and the woman stood there, sweating. "Some
idiot loaded the gun with blanks, she panted. I had to finish the job with my bare hands.
After 20 years of marriage, a wife decides to take her husband, Dave, to a strip club for his birthday. She figures, no harm if I'm there with him, right? As they walk in, the doorman grins and says, "Hey, Dave, how you doing?" Dave's wife narrows her eyes. "You've been here before?" "Oh, no." Dave laughs nervously. "He's on my bowling team." They sit down and a waitress strolls over with a glass of red wine. "Here you go, Dave. Your usual." His wife glares. "How does she know what you drink?" She's in the ladies' bowling league," Dave stammers. "We share lanes with them." Before she can respond, a stripper slinks over, throws her arms around Dave, and purrs, "Hi, Davey. Want your usual table dance, big boy?" That's it. His wife grabs her purse and storms out. Dave rushes after her, catching her just as she's jumping into a cab. Before she can slam the door, he slides in beside her. "Baby, I swear, she must have mistaken me for—" His wife explodes. "Liar, you're a cheating pig." As she unleashes a furious rant, the cab driver turns his head, shakes his head, and mutters, "Damn, Dave, looks like you picked an angry one tonight." Jenny is relaxing with her favorite magazine when she spots an ad for an all-expenses-paid cruise, just $500. Excited, she rushes to her husband, Jack. "Look, Jack, a cruise in 2 days for only $500? Jack sighs. "I'd love to, honey, but work is crazy. You go and have a great time." Jenny is a little disappointed, but decides she'll enjoy herself anyway. The next day at work, Jack's mistress, Brenda, comes running up to him, thrilled. "Jack, look, there's a last-minute cruise deal for just $500. Jack shrugs. "Not really my thing. Here, take $500. Go have fun." Brenda eagerly accepts, and coincidentally, both Jenny and Brenda end up on the same cruise. A few days later, Jenny returns home and excitedly tells Jack all about her trip, showing him photos. As Jack flips through the pictures, he suddenly spots Brenda in the background. Curious, he points and asks, "Who's that?" Jenny sniffs disdainfully. "Oh, her? I called her the cruise slut. She slept with half the men on board." The next day, Jack is at work when Brenda excitedly shares her own cruise photos. As he looks through them, Jack spots Jenny in the background. He points to her and asks, "Who's that?" Brenda smiles warmly. "Oh, her. Such a sweet woman. With all the men on board, she never left her husband's side for a second." A firefighter comes home from work and says to his wife, "You know, we have a great system at the fire station. Bell 1 rings, and we put on our gear. Bell 2 rings, and we slide down the pole. Bell 3 rings, and we're on the truck, ready to go. From now on, let's use the same system here. When I say bell 1, you strip naked. Bell 2, you jump in bed. Bell 3, we make love all night." His wife thinks it's a little weird, but kind of kinky, so she agrees. The next night, the firefighter comes home excited. "Bell 1." His wife strips naked. "Bell 2." She jumps into bed. "Bell 3." They start making love. After a few minutes, the wife suddenly yells, "Bell 4." The firefighter stops. "Bell 4? What the hell is Bell 4? She gasps. "Roll out more hose. You're nowhere near the fire." A woman brings her lover home while her husband is at work. Her 9-year-old son unexpectedly comes home early, sees them, and quietly hides in the bedroom closet. Moments later, the husband arrives. Panicked, the woman shoves her lover into the closet right next to her son. In the darkness, the boy whispers, "Dark in here." The man sighs. "Yes, it is. I have a baseball. That's nice. Want to buy it?" "No, thanks. My dad's outside." Fine. How much?" $150. "What? Ugh. Fine.
Just keep quiet. A few weeks later, the same thing happens. The lover is shoved into the closet again, and again he hears a little voice. "Dark in here." The man groans. "Oh, no, not this again. I have a Wilson infielder's glove." "How much?" $350. "This is robbery." "Fine." A few days later, the father says, "Hey, son, grab your glove. Let's go play catch." The boy hesitates. "I can't. I sold my ball and glove." "You what? How much did you sell them for?" $500. 500? That's outrageous. You can't rip people off like that. We're going to church. You need to confess your sins. At church, the father puts his son in the confession booth and shuts the door. In the darkness, the boy whispers, "Dark in here." The priest sighs, "Not you two."
The police detectives were struggling to get confessions out of their suspects. No one was talking. Then they heard about a mysterious telepath, a man who could instantly tell if someone was guilty just by looking at them. Skeptical but desperate, they decided to put him to the test. They brought in the first suspect. Without hesitation, the telepath said, "This man is guilty. He murdered a pizza delivery guy." The detectives stared in shock. He was exactly right. They hadn't even mentioned the case. "Unbelievable," one officer whispered. Next, they brought in another suspect. The telepath barely glanced at him before saying, "This man is innocent. He was framed for burglary by his neighbor, Bill Summers." The detectives were stunned. He was right again, but they still weren't convinced. So, as a final test, they brought in a random, beautiful woman, someone they knew had never committed a felony. The moment she entered, the telepath said, "This woman is guilty of theft." The lead detective smirked. "Aha! Got you! We knew she was innocent! You're a fraud!" They dismissed the woman and turned to leave. But as they reached the door, the telepath sighed and said, "You might want to catch up to her." "And why is that?" asked the officer. "Because she just stole your wallet." A man walks into a marriage counselor's office alone. The counselor frowns. "Sir, marriage therapy usually works best when both partners are present, but since you've already paid, I suppose we'll role play. I'll pretend to be your wife." The man instantly tenses up. Counselor, as wife. "Honey, are you unhappy in our marriage?" Man. "I can't complain." Counselor. "Is it the intimacy?" Man. "Nope, can't complain." Counselor. "Do you feel unappreciated?" Man. "Not at all, really, can't complain." Frustrated, the counselor breaks character. "Sir, this isn't getting us anywhere. Why don't you bring your wife next time?" The man sighs. No, that won't work." "Why not?" "Because with you, I can complain." A husband and wife were arguing on their way to dinner. The wife, fed up, snapped, "You're lucky to have me. No normal woman would want you." Determined to prove her wrong, the husband decided to test his charm. As they arrived, the hostess smiled endlessly at him, laughed at his jokes, and even offered to take his coat. The husband turned to his wife with a triumphant grin. "Don't get too excited," she said. "That's just her job. And she's married." "How do you know?" he asked. "I saw her wedding ring." Later, the husband went to the bathroom. On his way back, he accidentally bumped into a woman's chair. Apologizing, he bought her a drink, chatted for a few moments, and then returned to his wife, smug. "Just so you know," he boasted, "she invited me to join her for a drink." "Don't get too excited," his wife replied. "She's probably half blind." "How do you know?" "She walked in with a cane." A few minutes later, their waitress took their order, staring at the husband and flirting the entire time. "See?"
the husband beamed. "There are normal women who want me." His wife sighed. "Don't be an idiot. She has COVID." "How do you know?" "Because if she's interested in you, she clearly has no sense of taste." Was a 19-year-old Italian girl tells her mother, "Mama, I missed my period. 2 months now." Panicked, the mother rushes to buy a pregnancy test. It comes back positive. She screams, curses, and cries, then demands, "Who's the pig that did this to you? I want to know." Through tears, the daughter admits, "I only dated him for a few weeks," but picks up the phone and makes a call. Half an hour later, a Ferrari pulls up in front of their house. A distinguished, silver-haired man steps out, impeccably dressed in an Armani suit. He enters the house, sits down with the family, and speaks calmly. "Good morning. Your daughter informed me of the situation. I cannot marry her due to personal family matters, but I will take full responsibility. If she has a girl, she will receive a Ferrari, a beach house, 2 retail stores, a townhouse, a beachfront villa, and a $2 million bank account. If she has a boy, he will inherit 2 factories and a $4 million bank account. If it's twins, they'll each get a factory and $2 million. However, if the worst happens and there's a miscarriage, what do you suggest we do?" The father, silent until now, places a firm hand on the man's shoulder and says, "You try again."
A widower retired and bought a house near a high school, enjoying his peace until the new school year began. Every afternoon, 3 boys marched down the street, gleefully banging on every bin they passed. They did this day after day, driving the old man crazy. One afternoon, he stopped them and said, "You boys remind me of myself at your age. I'll give each of you $1 if you keep it up." Excited, the boys happily continued their drumming routine. A few days later, the old man came out looking concerned. "Times are tough with this recession. From now on, I can only pay you 50 cents each." The boys grumbled, but kept going. A week later, the man sighed and said, "Look, I can only afford 25 cents now." The boys snapped. "What? You think we're going to waste our time banging bins for a measly quarter? Forget it. We quit." And from that day on, the old man enjoyed his peace and quiet. A wealthy woman, passionate about antiques, found a beautiful vase during her travels. She loved it so much that she wanted her entire display room painted to match it perfectly. She announced a huge reward for anyone who could replicate the exact color. Many painters tried and failed, unable to satisfy her. One day, a confident painter arrived. He examined the vase for just a moment and instantly claimed he could match the color. Sure enough, his paint was a perfect match. The woman was thrilled and awarded him the job. His flawless work made him famous, and he built a thriving business. Years later, upon retiring, he passed the business to his son. The son asked, "Dad, I have just one question. How did you match that vase so perfectly?" The father leaned in and whispered, "I painted the vase." A young woman is walking into a cathedral when a priest stops her and says, "I'm sorry, miss. You can't come in without a bra." The young woman protests, "But I have a divine right." The priest replies, "A divine left too, but you can't come in." A woman joins a prestigious country club and overhears a group of men discussing their golf game. "I played on my college golf team," she says. "I was pretty good. Mind if I join you next week?" The men exchange glances. They don't want to say yes, but they're put on the spot. Finally, one says, "Sure, but we tee off at 6:30 a.m. He figures the early start will scare her off. "No problem," she says, "but I might be 15 minutes late." They roll their eyes, but agree. The next week, she arrives at 6:30 sharp and absolutely destroys them, shooting 2 under par. She's fun, gracious, and a great sport. The guys are stunned. Impressed, they invite her back. She smiles and says, "I'll be here at 6:30 or 6:45. Next week, she arrives on time, but plays left-handed. The men are floored as she still beats them with an even par round. Now they're dying to figure her out. On week 3, she actually shows up 15 minutes late. This time she plays right-handed again and narrowly wins. The men grumble that her tardiness is gamesmanship, but she's so charming they let it slide. Over post-game beers, one man finally asks, "Okay, we have to know, how do you decide whether to play right-handed or left-handed?" She blushes and grins. "Well, I'm ambidextrous," she says. "When I got married, I discovered my husband always sleeps in the nude. Before I leave for golf, I pull the covers off him. If his willy points to the right, I golf right-handed. If it points to the left, I golf left-handed." The men roar with laughter. Finally, one asks, "But what if it's pointing straight up?" She smirks. "Then I'm 15 minutes late." A politician, an oil baron, and their pilot crash in the middle of the ocean. They eventually wash up on an island and decide to split up, meeting back at the beach by sunset. At the meeting, the politician returns with 4 fish, the oil baron gathers wood for a fire, and the pilot finds a mysteriously sealed bottle. As they prepare to eat, a fight breaks out. The politician claims he deserves the extra fish since he caught them. The oil baron argues that his fire is what makes cooking possible, so it should be his. Just as they're about to come to blows, the pilot nervously rubs the bottle, and suddenly, the cork flies off. A massive green genie appears, arms crossed. "You have freed me, weary traveler," he booms. "To thank you, I shall grant 3 wishes. The pilot asks if each of them can have 1 wish instead, and the genie generously agrees. Before the pilot can speak, the politician, still fuming, points at the oil baron. "I wish all greedy people like him would disappear." The genie smirks, but before he can grant it, the oil baron snaps back. "Oh yeah? Well, I wish all power-hungry people like him would disappear." The genie pauses and turns to the pilot. "And what is your wish?" The pilot thinks for a moment, then shrugs. "I'd like my plane fixed, good as new." The politician and oil baron stare in disbelief. "You can wish for anything, and that's what you choose?" The pilot grins. "Well, I was going to wish for world peace. But you two just took care of that." A man walks into an antique store and starts browsing. Suddenly, he spots the most stunning bronze statue of a Siamese cat. "How much for the statue?" he asks the shop owner. "It's $200 for the statue, and $2,000 for the story that goes with it." The man scoffs. "I don't care about the story, I just want the statue." As he pays, the shop owner smirks. "All right, but trust me, you'll be back for the story." The man leaves the shop and heads down the street, carrying the cat statue. At the first crosswalk, he glances back and notices 3 or 4 cats sitting behind him, staring. A little weird, but whatever. A few blocks later, he checks again. 30 cats. His heart rate picks up. He walks faster. A few more blocks. Hundreds of cats now, all silently following him. Now he's running. By the time he reaches the pier, there are thousands of cats swarming the streets behind him. Desperate, he does the only thing he can think of. He hurls the statue into the water. To his shock, every single cat leaps in after it and vanishes beneath the waves. The man stands there, panting, staring at the empty street. Then, without a second thought, he sprints back to the antique shop. As he bursts through the door, the shop owner smirks. "Told you you'd be back for the story." The man shakes his head, gasping. "Forget the story. Do you have a statue of a politician?" Many years ago, a clever old sculptor was finally allowed to emigrate from the Soviet Union to the United States, where his son lived. At Moscow airport, a Soviet customs officer rummaged through his luggage and pulled out a bust of Lenin. Customs officer, what is that? Old man, what is that? What is that? Do not say what is that. Say who is that? That is Lenin, the genius who created our glorious workers' paradise. The officer smiled approvingly and waved him through. Upon arrival at JFK Airport, an American customs officer opened his suitcase and found the same bust. Customs officer, what is that? Old man, what is that? What is that? Do not say, what is that? Say, who is that? That is Lenin, the bastard who stole my best years. I'm putting him in my toilet where he belongs. The officer chuckled and let him through. Finally, the old man arrived at his family's home in Brooklyn. As he unpacked, his grandson pointed at the bust. Grandson, who is that, Grandpa? The old man smiled and patted his head. Who is that? Who is that? Don't say who is that. Say what is that? That, my child, is 8 pounds of gold. There once was a cruel and ruthless king who enjoyed executing people at his whim. One day, a trusted minister gave him bad advice, and the furious king sentenced him to death, to be thrown to his pack of ravenous, bloodthirsty guard dogs. The minister fell to his knees and pleaded, Your Majesty, I have served you faithfully for 10 years, and this is how you repay me. The king remained unmoved. The minister desperately begged, At least grant me 10 more days before my execution. The king, intrigued and curious rather than merciful, agreed. For the next 10 days, the minister devoted himself to the royal dogs, feeding them, bathing them, tending to them with care and kindness. The once ferocious beasts grew to love him. When the day of execution arrived, the king ordered the minister to be thrown into the dog pit. But instead of tearing him apart, the dogs wagged their tails, licked his face, and played with him like an old friend. The king was shocked. What happened to my vicious dogs? He roared. The minister smiled and replied, I served the dogs for just 10 days, and they never forgot my kindness. I served you for 10 years, and you forgot it after a single mistake. The king paused, reflecting on his terrible mistake. The next day, he replaced the dogs with crocodiles.